I started heroin at 18 and it was like a tragedy. I've done 12 prison sentences, I've been to multiple rehabs, and then I discovered shoplifting. In my lifespan of shoplifting, I stole over £10 million worth of goods in retail value.
Whoa.
And my bread and butter was... My lungs collapsed basically from the heroin and the crack I was smoking, and I collapsed. I woke up in hospital a couple of days later. They actually told my family they thought I wasn't going to make it.
And you're clean now, right?
I got this job as a peer mentor. But as soon as I interviewed Tommy Robinson, everything changed. We are putting you through far-right extremist training. You know, end up talking about Nigel Farage. I came into work one day and I was pulled into a room and asked, "Are you homophobic?" Every single staff member in there ignored me. I went into a room, a side room, and broke down, like actually broke down crying. You know, I'm working for a drug and alcohol service that are meant to help people, and they're almost pushing me back to heroin.
I know it's annoying when creators ask you to subscribe, but since I started, the channel's grown 10 times faster. If you don't sub, YouTube probably won't show you the next episode. It's free and takes 2 seconds. Hit subscribe. It's a pleasure to have you here. I've known you for a while, and you're a lovely, lovely man. I want to know, well, we're going to get onto an awful thing that's happening with a charity you've been working with, relating to what we talk about on this show very often, relating to Tommy Robinson, relating to the Southport killer and all of those things. But I want to go into your story first for those who don't know. So tell me a little bit about the beginning of your addiction story. What got you in that place?
It's quite different to a lot of others, I think. And I think that's why it might stand out from a lot of other stories in addiction. They're all the same, you know. But I had a really good upbringing, good family, strong family. I grew up on a council estate, but yeah, I don't think on paper I was expected to be this raving crackhead, heroin addict, in and out of prison. But what I've learned is addiction, it doesn't stereotype, and I think that's what a lot of people need to be educated on. It can happen to them. You know, it's one bad decision away from happening to anyone. It happened to me at a young age. I was 17. I started using drugs, and within a year of trying out cannabis, I was a fully fledged heroin addict. Literally. Like I said, like I got a great family, and my parents done everything they could for me. They're still together to this day now, which is quite a rarity in 2025. And yeah, you know, I had everything I wanted growing up. Just your typical traditional British happy family life, let's say. And when I was about 14, 15, going into high school, I started to develop a mental health, let's say. You know, it was probably something I had from a younger age, but I really started to notice it when I went into high school. And later on in my life, I was diagnosed with severe OCD. That was like the diagnosis I was given. But basically what it was in a nutshell was I would always think something bad was going to happen to myself or my loved ones, and I would do these rituals to make sure they were okay. And that boiled down to everything from what I would wear on a day-to-day, what routes I would take going to school, what I would eat, what I would say. And it just got really, really obsessive.
I had that.
Yeah?
Yeah, really bad as well. Up all night, switching light switches off and on. I had to go to therapy for a couple of years. It's a strange illness because it's one of those, it's like a mental illness, but you are aware that it's mental while you're doing it, but you still feel compelled to do it.
Yeah. Did you tackle yours young then?
I was, when I was 17, I was in therapy for specifically that. And you know what? The therapist, it was a strange way of working. And he said to me, okay, if you were in, right, who do you fancy? Weird thing to say to a 17-year-old kid who's in your therapy, but he said that. And I said, Keira Knightley. I didn't know who to
She was all right at the time, wasn't
she? Not that she's horrible now, but she
Love Actually and Bend It Like Beckham. And
so I was watching all that as a teenager, Bend It Like Beckham, loving it. And he goes, right, so when you go up and do your, going around that, I mean, I pulled the door handle off my car because I was checking it was locked so often. The handle came off in my hand eventually. That's when I was like, okay, I've got a problem. And he said, right, if Keira Knightley was in bed with you, and if you got up and did all the things, she would leave and you wouldn't have a chance with her. Would you stay in bed? And I said, I suppose I would. And he was like, And it just, that was the start of like trying to unravel what was really going on in my head. But sorry, do go on. I just wanted to tell that.
Yeah, no. And these are the things that the counsellor or the psychiatrist I was working with 10 plus years later, after all this carnage I've lived, was kind of explaining to me these type of things. And that was the other things I would go through, the light switches, the putting my trainers in the right, the right direction, and walking around lampposts, and if I missed it, I got to go back and touch it. And I remember a doctor saying to me, like, have you ever tried not to do it, like? And I was like, no. And he was like, why? He was like, because if I don't and something happens, like, and you kind of get this false sense of like, when you do these things, if something bad does not happen, it kind of like solidifies that what you're doing is working. And it gets quite toxic, don't it? So it controlled my life totally, to a point where all my mates, I'm in high school, they think I'm an absolute weirdo. But like, 2008, 2009, mental health wasn't really spoken about then as much as it is now. I think it's spoken too much now, to be honest. Which we'll get onto, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But back then, I didn't really want to speak about it. If anything, I looked at it as sort of a joke. Me and my mates would laugh about it. So instead of going to a doctor or telling my mum and dad, I kind of seek drugs. I self-medicated.
And you started with, was it marijuana?
Started with cannabis. And even then, like, all my mates smoked weed. I didn't, like, from year 7, 8, and 9, the first 3 forms of high school, didn't touch it. All my mates did. I didn't touch it. I was quite scared of it, to be honest. And then in year 10, I just tried it. Just had a puff of a spliff, and it kind of just unlocked a whole new world for me. It took away those problems straight away. And I became very quickly, because of my OCD, because of my addictive personality, I became very, very addicted to it because it took away these anxieties. Fast forward about 6 months, 10 months, I've become the biggest weed head, biggest weed smoker there is, to the point where I'm like cashing in my like PlayStation 2, taking all my, my goodies that my parents have bought me for Christmases and birthdays, and I'm selling them for cannabis. Yeah. This is not heroin. This is not crack. I'm not like physically addicted for the drug, but I am in my head. This is all I want, all I think of. And I think I abused it so much that this one time I was going to work. My dad, I just coming out of high school, and my dad said, right, you need to get a job. You need to go to town, drop off some CVs. And I remember waiting on the bus stop in the morning with my CVs, and I put my hand in my pocket, and there was a half a spliff, like dibbed out, put it in my pocket, and I was like, oh, lovely, I'll have a puff of that now. And I never really smoked weed in the mornings. It was always in the nights. And I had this puff of this spliff, and I don't really remember much apart from going back home and with all my CVs. I did go to town, but I was absolutely, it was like the first time ever that I had this paranoia of smoking cannabis. And I thought it was a bit of a fluke because I'd done it in the morning and I had another spliff in the night and I had that feeling again. So it was like, the reason I started smoking weed was to take away these anxieties, to stop me doing these rituals. Ended up triggering it even more. So again, instead of speaking to someone, I just looked for other drugs to take. And I literally stopped smoking weed there and then and went on to other drugs like benzodiazepine, pregabalin, your antidepressants, your alcohol, my friends sniffing cocaine on the weekends, that type of stuff. And just to nip it in the bud quickly, how I really got into heroin, I'd say literally it was less than a year from that moment I started exploring other drugs. My uncle came out of prison, who was like the black sheep of our family at the time. And I was quite drawn to him. Like, there was like this force field. I wanted to hang around with my uncle. It was very strange, but I looked up to him. And I was kind of very quickly introduced to another real dark world, kind of groomed, really, They call it county lines now. I live in Cardiff, the capital of Wales, but you can imagine so many different organised gangs moving into the cities to sell drugs. And my uncle would kind of facilitate that for different people he met in prison. And I ended up looking after drugs, running drugs for him, for these people, looking after, weapons and all types of stuff. But to me, it was like a movie, and it was all exciting. What I didn't realize was my uncle was a heroin addict. He hid it very well. He was a very funny, charismatic person, always had money, and didn't look like he had weight on him, but he was smoking heroin, which he got his habit from the prison system. So when he was in prison in the 90s, when mandatory drug testing came in, rather than people smoking cannabis, which will be in your system for over a month, and if you get caught, you'll get extra days, people started smoking heroin because it was only in your system for a couple of days, and he became one of those. And obviously when he got out of prison, he wanted to use heroin more. And yeah, I was around it, and I was very desensitized to it all. And I think it was one night I went out with a friend from school on a night out, and we were taking cocaine. And on the way home, I went back to these flats where my uncle lived, and there's a couple of blocks, and there's always every day's the same day in these areas. Do you know what I mean? None of them work, and all using drugs, very, very chaotic kind of lifestyle. And I went back to this house party where lots of them were smoking crack cocaine. And I think because I was under the influence, and because I'd been around it for months on end now, dealing it, holding it, seeing the type of people who actually buy crack cocaine. When we look at people who buy crack or heroin, we think of those people who are living on the streets and they're very vulnerable, but there's businessmen coming to purchase cocaine, there's teachers, there's all sorts, very well dressed, very well presented people.
Teachers.
Yeah. Like, you'd be surprised, it's a problem that, like I said, it doesn't stereotype.
It's not all Trainspotting.
No, that's the end game. See, when we look at addiction, we only see the end of it, and I think we need to educate people about those early stages, because if we educated people on those early stages, you'd never have that false sense of, I always felt like when I looked at my uncle and people in that world who were using, I thought, so they lied to me in school, did they? It's bullshit. So it ain't that bad, And the people who were using would tell me that as well. It's not that bad, obviously because they wanted me to try it and get involved in that life, because when you're an addict, you want people to be on your level. It's very crabs in the bucket mentality, and it's all about how, what can I get from you? So, yeah. And I actually done a documentary for BBC Three called The Drugs Map of Britain, if anyone wants to check it out. And it's about crack cocaine within South Wales and the valleys. And crack is an epidemic. And I think it's across the UK. It's not just in South Wales. But you'd be quite surprised how many people use crack cocaine. Cocaine is very accessible. Everyone uses cocaine. I think everyone's tried cocaine at least once. But do
you think that is the case? I wonder that. Because I'm just wondering if people are watching now and they're going, well, hang on, or is it just a large number of people and all of, because I mean, I did at university and all my friends did, but some people you mentioned to, and they go, what? So I don't know.
Yeah. I think there is people out there a bit a bit wet behind the ears, quite naive, quite shocked to hear that. But I think
we're the naive ones because we fell for it and we all did it.
Yeah, exactly. But if you look at the working class areas, especially where I live, rugby culture, football culture, everyone's using cocaine, and I would say there's a population of them who smoke crack as well. On the end of a weekend, go back to a house, they've either got cocaine, they'll wash it back, have a few pipes, and some of those will fall victim to becoming full-on addicts. So it's a problem. It's more of a problem than it should be.
So the first time, do you remember the first time you tried? So heroin, in the movies, there's a thing with a spoon, right, being heated up, and then there's an injection and there's like a tying of string around your arm. Is that what it is?
There is that, yeah, with the tourniquet. And look, I've seen some terrible sights, and Trainspotting did paint a good picture of that. But like I said, I feel with Trainspotting, I think it was that shock factor trying to scare people, showing you the worst side of heroin, which is great. And I think they've done a good job with that. Obviously not a good enough job for me. But when you think of heroin, you think straight away of injecting, but there's another form of using heroin, which a lot of people do, and that's smoking it on the foil.
Okay.
the first time I tried heroin was actually in a spliff. So it was that night I tried cocaine as well. So I had a try of the crack on the can, and because of my OCD and because of cocaine being a stimulant, when I took the first hit, it was really intense. I really enjoyed it. But about 5 minutes later, I really started to get paranoid and thinking everyone in the room was trying to kill me. And this boy who was sat in the corner said, come here. And he had a spliff in his hand and he said, have a puff of this. And I was like, nah, mate, like I don't smoke weed no more. That'll make me even worse. He went, no, it's laced with gear, meaning heroin. And I looked at him, and the way I looked at him, he went, no, don't be silly. You won't get addicted. You've got to smoke it for like a week straight to get an actual addiction. And I was like, okay. And that's another thing that we look at with heroin. We think, you have to, this is the thing, and this is like the common kind of motto. You've got to smoke it for a week to get physically addicted to heroin. But like any other drug, mentally, you can get addicted to it straight away, which we don't talk about. And yeah, I took the heroin, and it was like a light switch went off of safety. So I went from this really etched out person who was really worried and thinking everyone was out to get me to having 2 puffs of this spliff and just all my problems going away.
Is there a way for someone, I've never tried it, and most people I don't think
explain?
Have. Yeah, because they show it in like silly ways, don't they, in movies? But what is it?
It is really hard to explain. The way I described it, I probably took kind of examples from others, lying in a warm bath, after 2-3 glasses of whiskey, wrapped up in cotton wool. That's another way people look at it, of a warm, fuzzy feeling. Remember Sonic the Hedgehog? When you jumped on the box and you had the shield?
Yeah.
You feel like you've got that
Safe.
shield on you. Yeah. And the other thing I would say is you could drop me off in the Antarctica in a pair of boxer shorts and I'd survive. You just feel so warm and glowing and like nothing will affect you. That's how you feel with it.
It sounds bloody great.
It is great.
Yeah.
But the consequences aren't.
Isn't it shit that everything in life that's really amazing is not good for you? I mean, just chocolate.
I was about to say chocolate. Yeah.
I love chocolate. Why can't I sit there? Well, I guess it's that they did the experiments on the mice or rats or something.
Yeah.
Have you seen that, the dopamine thing?
Yeah.
They die. They don't eat because they're just pushing a button that makes dopamine happen in their brains. They don't even think to eat. So
they done that with the heroin as well. They done the test with the mice on heroin, and they just gave them heroin. And then what they did was they put like activities and other things in the cage, let's say, to prove that these mice, like if you actually give someone something to do, they will not just choose the heroin sort of thing. I think that's what it is. Maybe don't quote me on that, but I think that is what it is. It's like the example of saying basically people can overcome addiction, but you've got to just give them an opportunity.
Purpose.
A purpose, yeah.
Bloody hell. And you became you were a drugs runner, as you say, and you did some stints in prison. Was that shoplifting and stuff?
Yeah, so like I said, I started heroin at 18, and it was like a tragedy for like people in my community, my family, of course, myself. Like I was a really, I was a liked person. I was well known, quite funny, and it was a tragedy for everyone who knew me. It just went like that, First of all, I would do my best to like borrow money off people. That tap quickly ran dry. And then I used to go around universities and pretend I was a lost student and blag people for money and stuff. That's what I used to do. And then I discovered shoplifting. See, I always wanted to make my money for my fix, but I also didn't want to be this bad person. I was trying to justify me for being an addict, and I didn't want to sell drugs. I didn't want to rob people. Didn't want to hurt anyone. So I thought shoplifting was the easiest way to make money, the less punishment for jail time, and I'm also not hurting anyone in the process. That's how I looked at it. And if people watching will know now, like we are really at a crisis with shoplifting. The government say the police say it's a petty crime. In my lifespan of shoplifting, I stole over £10 million worth of goods in retail value.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's
so,
mad.
And that's me on my own. When I got caught by the cooperatives, and I went to court for them, they estimated over 4 years I stole 3.5 million. And that's just one shop. And I done many shops, you know. I had like different targets.
What kind of thing were you nicking?
Alcohol. Alcohol. My bread and butter was like alcohol, Yankee candles, aftershaves,
And then you're selling it, are you?
sunglasses.
To make money for
Yeah. So obviously when I first started, I used to just nick something, find a friend who'd want it for a deal and give it to him half price or whatever. But then when I got deeper into that world, I found, like, we call them fencers, just people who will buy everything off you in bulk at a third of the price. So my car would be full every day with 30 grand's worth of kit, like, you know, the glove compartment, you know, the whole of Specsavers in the glove compartment, you know. And so they would buy anything, literally from Tipex, batteries, Fixodent, Ambipure plugins, to alcohol, sunglasses, and expensive clothes.
Did you have like a big trench coat? Is that
Yeah. Similar to the barber one I have over there. Used to have
Yeah.
big trench coats, big heavy pockets. Never used to go in with bags. You see some shoplifters, the real, you know, desperate ones who don't really care. They walk in with their Sports Direct bags, and you know, you stand out like a sore thumb. I didn't want to go in with a bag, you know. Going into a shop with a bag and coming out with and not buying anything isn't a good look, you know. But
Sure.
even then though, I would always buy something. Even if I had £1 just to buy a pack of chewing gums, I would always go to the counter and purchase something. I never wanted to be that shoplifter who was running in, running out. It was an art form to it.
Yeah, was there a bit of a frisson, a bit of excitement?
Yeah. I got addicted to shoplifting in itself. Shoplifting was an addiction. Very, very good money, and this is what I'm saying. It's a whole topic I talk about quite a lot, like, you know. But I'm actually speaking tomorrow on LBC about shoplifting because it's such an epidemic at the moment. But I think it's not one shoe that fits all with shoplifting. There is many ways we need to tackle this problem. If you are a chaotic drug user who's in and out of prison for shoplifting, and prison is not working, but you're coming out and shoplifting again, we need to look at treating you in another way in the community, rehabilitation. That adds on to, we've got a prison crisis now, an overcrowded prison system as well. If we tackle this large population of people who are in and out of prison all the time through rehabilitation, that would solve not just their drug problems, the shoplifting crisis, but it would also help alleviate the pressure on the prison system. But if you are a professional shoplifter, someone who isn't using it for drugs, someone who is just doing this for monetary gain, and, you know, you're paying for your car, your house, your holidays through shoplifting, then we need to look at stiffer sentencing, because with shoplifting, the punishment outweighs the reward. The reward outweighs the punishment. You could make the same amount shoplifting if you do it properly as a drug dealer, as a armed robber, as a burglar. But with those other offences, you are doing a long time in jail. Shoplifting, you're only doing a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
For making 10 grand a week.
So you'd have stiffer sentences for shoplifters and
professional shoplifters, yeah.
And get those who are clearly addicted to substances, get them onto some sort of rehab.
Yes. And then for the cost of living crisis, these mothers who are going in and nicking a loaf of bread and a pint of milk. This is a government problem. You need to give them vouchers and get them to a food bank. And we need to, that is a higher up problem. These people shouldn't go to jail, of course.
Yeah.
It's the same as the homeless problem. We shouldn't be having people living on the streets in 2025.
It's sad. It's terrible. It's an issue that we don't speak about enough, actually. It's a terrible problem. And having to steal a loaf of bread to feed your family, bloody hell.
It's ridiculous, isn't it?
I can't even. So another thing I wanted to ask, I saw there's pictures of you and sort of stories about you, right? And then you've got your top off, and there's all these marks all over you. What are those marks?
So those marks are from picking after using crack. I used to think there was worms coming out of my body.
Oh my God.
So like, I love picking spots on the best of times.
Yeah.
Don't we all, like watching pimple videos and stuff?
My wife does mine.
Yeah. So when I was on the drug, I would like really look into my body. I've got scars all over my body now. Luckily, you can't really see them, but that is what that was. It was from picking my body, and I would be my whole body would be a scab. I would try and keep this half not pickable.
Yeah.
So it was literally like, you know, when you see these people who have like a sleeve of tattoos from the neck down, that is what my body was full of, was just scabs. But this was how I made my money. Whether that was asking people for money as pretending to be a lost student, or if I was shoplifting. I always tried to dress smart. I didn't want to like walk into a shop and then think, you're watching, he's a shoplifter. You would never have thought it. But those photos are at my worst. They're at my lowest when I'm actually going through a withdrawal. And those photos are horrendous.
Yeah, they're hard to look at. It's great to see you now. You look in great shape. And I'm worrying people will look at you and you've got a little cut on your forehead.
Yeah, I'm not picking, I promise.
Yeah, that's a...
So I had a cyst in my head. And obviously being on camera and stuff, I'm very self-conscious now. And again, another problem, NHS. The NHS wouldn't touch it. And I had to go private. Paid £990 for it.
Bloody hell.
And I thinks to myself, like, if I was still on the drugs and I didn't have the money, this could have became a bigger problem. And how many other people out there have got these issues and they can't afford it because we have a strain on the NHS.
Yeah. Well, it's good for people to know that. And you're clean now, right?
Yeah, so I've been clean now 5 years.
Congratulations.
So it was unexpected. You know, I tried everything. My family tried everything. I've done 12 prison sentences. I've been to multiple rehabs, religious rehabs, non-religious rehabs, hospital. I've spent many times in hospital thinking, is this the time? And it ended up not being. You know, my family would take me abroad to try and get me off drugs, and moving to my grandmother's in Northamptonshire, and just none of it ever worked. But during lockdown 2020, when you know, a lot of things changed. A lot of people thought shoplifters couldn't. This is it. You can't shoplift because it's lockdown. But it ended up being probably the best time for me as a shoplifter, because I was allowed to wear a mask and no one would say anything, and no one would attempt to stop you, because they think you are a disease. Yeah, character. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They thought everyone probably had a disease, but if you're a shoplifter as well, like, you know, and so, and during that time, how many people became alcoholics during lockdown? And that first lockdown was really, really nice weather. So I had people asking for sunglasses and alcohol, and that's all I stole during lockdown was alcohol and sunglasses. For some reason, Specsavers was still open. 1 in, 1 out. And I used to go in and say, can I have an eye test? So I'd go to, like, I don't know, Hereford, for example. I'd go in, queue up, say, can I have an eye test? And they'd be like, yeah. Give them a fake address locally to Hereford. And as soon as they'd done that test, they think, well, this guy's he's not obviously stealing from us. He's give us his details. And I'd say, can I look at the glasses? And they go, yeah, crack on. And I would just take 50 pairs of frames, 20 pairs of sunglasses, walk out, you know, and they're like £300 a pop, £200 a pop, the frames, but I'd sell them for £20 from this, you know, this guy buy it in bulk. So I made a lot of money during that lockdown, but as any addict does, the more money you make, the more drugs you take. You know, I would make £2,000 in a day shoplifting, and in the morning I didn't have enough for a pack of cigarettes because it would all go on drugs. So I think my body was starting to deteriorate quite a lot. I was smoking crack and heroin on a large scale, more than I needed to. And my body, my lungs started to feel it. And one day I woke up in the middle of the night with really bad pains, couldn't breathe, and I collapsed. I woke up in hospital a couple of days later with all these, you know, all this machinery on me, the mask, everything. They actually told my family they thought I wasn't going to make it. I had pleurotic pneumonia. My lungs collapsed basically from all the heroin and the crack I was smoking. And I was in there for about a month. And that was the first time in my life that I actually thought, I don't want to do this anymore. every other time I tried to get off drugs, it was for other people, like my family, going to rehab for my mum and dad, or, you know, a partner, or, you know, my grandmother. Please, Cullen, please get off the drugs. I want to see you clean before I pass on. And unfortunately, my nan died whilst I was in prison one time.
Yeah.
So, you know, I tried many times and it just didn't work. But this time, for some reason, I knew it. My OCD played a part as well, because I was that certain that I wasn't going to make it. I caught sepsis whilst I was in there as well. They were trying to flush the infections out of my lungs through steroids and antibiotics, and it wasn't working. So they wanted to withdraw it manually with a big, you know, like a syringe. And I caught sepsis whilst I was in there then as well. So it was just like one thing after another. I actually thought I was going to come out of there with a gas mask on, and that was it. That was my life, because every time I took it off, I couldn't breathe. And I would have been happy with that. I would have been happy with spending the rest of my life with this oxygen bag at that point. And I remember saying to myself, please, like, let me get out of here, and I promise I'll never take drugs again. I'll share my story to whoever needs to hear it. I'll help whoever I can. Please let me get out of here. And that's how, I don't know if that's the case with you when you were younger, but that's how my OCD works. It's like my inner self telling me to do these things to make sure this is okay. And
you obsess over the opposite of your obsession almost.
yes, yeah. And
I've been obsessed about closing my door at night, making sure it was shut. So I was always pulling it. Will it open? Is it definitely shut? Is it definitely shut? Then I had to obsess about leaving it open. I would only go to sleep if the door was slightly open. That was the only way to get past it. Yeah.
Get past it.
Yeah.
Wow. That's so interesting. Yeah. So that's kind of what happened. And I was on a 90 mil of methadone at the time. So I've got this massive heroin addiction. I'm using crack, you know, £300 worth a day of crack. And I'm also on a methadone script, which is a substitute for heroin. And when I was in the hospital, they tried knocking me down on my methadone, the doctors who give it to me, let's say, in the drug service. And this nurse came into me and said, look, we've spoken to your nurse and they've said they're going to knock you down to this amount. You can stay on the methadone when you get out of hospital, but you have to pick it up every single day at a chemist, including weekends. Which means, like, I don't have a life, basically, because I have to go to this chemist every day to feel okay. Otherwise, I'll be violently ill. Or you can be a guinea pig. You can be a trial for this new drug called Buvidal. And I was like, Buvidal? And it was during, like, lockdown, you know, the talk of forced vaccinations. And now they've got this injection they want to give the heroin addicts. You know, in my head, I'm a conspiracy theorist at this time, you know, balls deep in all conspiracies, late at night, smoking crack, watching YouTube, thinking like, you know, they're going to kill us first with this Buvidal jab, you know?
Yeah.
But I said to myself, like, you know, I'm contradicting myself if I go back out on the methadone, like in what I'm saying about turning my life around. And I thought, I'll try it. So what this injection is for your people, it's basically a long-lasting injectable blocker. So I don't know if you've ever heard of antabuse for alcohol. So when alcoholics try and get off alcohol, they give them this tablet called antabuse. And if they use alcohol, they'll be violently sick. So it's like a deterrent.
Oh, I see.
You can't even use like certain hand washes because you'll be ill from the alcohol. And they've designed this one for heroin called Buvidal. So you inject it once a month. And if you try and smoke, inject, it just wouldn't work. You're wasting your money. So if I snapped my leg and went to hospital, they tried giving me morphine, it wouldn't work. You know, that's what this whole point of this injection was. And I thought, you know what? You start on a weekly one, you have the first week one, and then they put you onto the monthly one. And I thought, you know what? I'll try the weekly one. And if it don't work, I'll just go back on the meth. At least I've tried. And I'm now speaking to you 5 years later, you know, still clean, you know.
Amazing.
And I literally, before then, literally from 17 to 28, every day of my life out on the streets, if it wasn't in prison, I was addicted to heroin. I think the longest time I was free of heroin addiction was 3 months outside, and it was 6 months inside, because even inside I was using drugs as well. So yeah, 5 years clean now.
It's amazing. I mean, I met you a couple years ago, I think it was, in the Michael Franzese gig that Sean Atwood put on in Cardiff. And I don't think we knew of each other at that point.
Yeah.
And I remember just you got on stage, I think, to introduce Michael, was it, or after?
Yeah, I want to say a big shout out to Sean Atwood for that, actually, because the Woke Brigade again tried cancelling Michael Franzese's gig in one of the events, and he phoned me last minute and said, "Do you know any venues?" And we managed to get it for him, and I wasn't going to go. I had other things on, and he went, "No, you got to come." He said, "To say thank you, I want you to like say, I think it was the Q&A part. He was like, I want you to ask Michael Franzese questions on stage." And I was like, fair play to Sean. Like, you know, as a podcaster, you know, it's a dream, innit?
Yeah.
You know, and
that's for anyone who doesn't know, that's the mafia boss from Michael Franzese.
Yeah. So that goes
what
down.
a cheer you got from everyone there. And I was like, who's this fella? Everyone's loving him.
Yeah.
So your story, I mean, at least locally and now I suppose nationally is a huge inspiration for other people. So
yeah, I think in the drug world especially, like I'm quite well known. The recovery world, let's not say the drug world, the recovery world, quite well known. In Wales as well, like our platform, the Central Club, we're the biggest in Wales, like by far. So yeah, like I'm very blessed, like, and I'm very lucky because before 2020, when I got off the drugs, I was hated. You know, I was known as, you know, someone not to be trusted. You know, a failure, a letdown, a disappointment, and someone you wouldn't want to be around. So it's really nice to be, you know, accepted and welcomed by people in my community.
There are still some circles that are not happy with you for other reasons, political reasons. So I guess without going too much into the weeds, just because it's all sort of charities and organizations and things.
Yeah.
What's been going on recently?
So it's basically from the moment I got clean off drugs. So obviously I promised myself that I'd go public and share my journey if I got off drugs, and I did. And, you know, in that recovery world, kind of took it by storm. You know, I had a lot of support in my area. And because I was on this Bouverdale job, I was like one of the trailblazers trialing it. A lot of services were interested in me because you're on the Bouverdale. We want to know how it works to try and help others to go on it, you know, get funding for more. And you could say I'm a bit of an anomaly. So if anyone's watching this who's worked in services, or anyone who's had drug problems, if you're on drugs, or if you get off drugs and you want to get into employment, especially with like drug and alcohol services, normally you're volunteering for a long time, like 2-3 years people volunteer for before they even get a sniff in or a look in as a paid employer, you know. And I think that's wrong, because I think myself and others who have been through that life, lived experience is better than anything. You know, if you've lived that life, you were going to be the best drug worker to help others through it. You're an inspiration. You've got that empathy, and you got the blueprint of how you've got off it. You can help others, and that's the sad reality of it. But I was kind of an anomaly. I went onto this like peer initiative thing, which I was contacted by a drug and alcohol service called Kaleidoscope to do this survey, this lived experience survey, talking about Bouverdale. And the people have to bear with us, but what happened was I would call up people who are who have tried the Bouverdale, to ask them questions. How has it worked for you? What hasn't worked? And from them, we would create this survey. And with the statistics and the numbers, we would then give that to Welsh Government. And we done such a good job. Welsh Government approved of it, and they then funded Bouverdale for another 3 years of £9 million. So we done a great thing, you know. And I got to take my hat off to Kaleidoscope for getting me involved in that. You know, I'm only 3 months clean. They've given me a laptop, they've given me a phone, and they paid me in vouchers, I think it was, to do this. And that was the first thing ever that I was like, wow, like I'm actually being valued by someone to do something. This is great.
Purpose.
About 2 months after this, I've been contacted by Kaleidoscope to say, there's a job going in Cardiff. I think it's got your name written all over it. And I have to say, like, Kaleidoscope have been amazing. And without them, I wouldn't be where I am today, really. And I got this job as a peer mentor. Now, I've gone public with my stories socially. I've now landed this job, and I've also decided that I'm going to start this podcast, this platform called the Central Club. Now, this is what I want people to understand, why I started this platform. I told you earlier, addiction doesn't stereotype. I come from a very, understanding, cultured family. Like I said, my family came here. My father's side came here after World War II. They were Greek. They came here, worked hard, contributed to society, and integrated massively. I come from a council estate, with all backgrounds, and I'm from a city of Cardiff, which is very multicultural. Cardiff had one of the first black settlements. We had a massive dockland. So, like, growing up, like, very, very cultured, and obviously when I was 17, I got on heroin. When I got off it in lockdown, you've got George Floyd, you've got Black Lives Matter, you've got, COVID, anti-vax, vax. And I remember, like, waking up thinking, wow, everyone is so divided. Like, some of my friends I wanted to chat to were like, yeah, he don't speak to him. He's converted to Islam. He's a born-again Christian. This guy's woke. I didn't even know what it meant. He's based, he's woke, he's far left, he's far right. And I was thinking to myself, I just want to chat to my mates. Like, I don't give a fuck about your political viewpoints. Because there was a time back then, early 2010s, where, do you remember the times where you'd hang around with people regardless of their viewpoints?
Yeah.
Like, you probably voted Conservatives. I voted probably Labour, being a Welshman. And it didn't matter, like, do you know what I mean? We're mates, like,
Or you didn't vote.
Or you didn't vote, yeah. But but literally, it didn't matter what political ideology you had with your mates, you would still be mates. And I was blown back with how everyone was just divided and didn't speak to each other just on their viewpoints. And I thought, I want to start a podcast called The Central Club. I've been called a smackhead. I've been called a lot of things in my life, so I'm not offended, and I feel comfortable with sitting with someone I probably don't agree with. So I want to start a podcast. And the other part of it is to eradicate stigma and change the perceptions of heroin addicts like myself, that I can change and others can change. And when I got into services, they were very supportive. Like, so they're starting this journey at the same time. My journey as a worker and my journey starting my podcast, right? And I thought they benefit, they complemented each other, let's say, very well. To the point where, like, very early on, I had Mark Drakeford, who was the first Minister of Wales. He's only just stopped. You probably heard of him. He became famous in lockdown because of the way he done it compared to others. A lot of people in Wales hate him. He's the one who introduced 20 mile per hour in Wales. Yeah. So, but we managed to interview him on, like, episode 4. And, like, the drug and alcohol services who I worked for loved that, because it's like, wow, you've got Mark Drakeford on. We're lucky enough to manage to speak to, our local constituents about drug problems, and you've got the First Minister. So, like, they would use me quite a lot. Like, there was a lot of articles, and they would say, oh, check out our employer, Cullan Mais, who he has his podcast, The Central Club. They even sponsored my podcast, and I interviewed the CEO, I interviewed employers, it was great. And I thought, this is going to work well. But I did see as well, like, a lot of jealousy in some employers. There was people who were like, who does this fucking ex-criminal heroin addict think he is now, bloody, working and doing this and doing that. But everything seemed to be fine, right? I thought the CEO I worked for was such a liberal guy, but liberal in the sense I thought it was a good thing, like, he's open to listening to people. He knows that if I interview someone, I might not agree with them, that's okay.
And then what changed all that?
Well, I think I'd done about 50 episodes before it really, and I'm talking, I've interviewed racial injustice, like big famous cases like the Cardiff 5. I've interviewed, LGBTQ communities. I've really done the whole board, from footballers to, identity politics, let's say. But as soon as I interviewed Tommy Robinson, everything changed. Everything changed. And it was as if, like, my motto, my quote, the whole reasoning for the Central Club went out the window. They just didn't matter anymore. They were all for that idea of staying down the middle and interviewing both sides. And, but as soon as I interviewed Tommy Robinson, that was it, game over.
Which is so bizarre because, I mean, you've spoken to him and I've spoken to him. There are people who are far further to the right than him.
Yeah.
He doesn't seem to be racist. He doesn't.
No.
I don't know. So how did you? I mean, how was it a good conversation you had? With
Great
him?
conversation, you know. And I think I asked, questions that those on the left would have wanted to hear. It wasn't like, and normally as a host, I'm very impartial. I'll just sit there and let them speak. I interviewed the Jay Slater case, Abe, who was the man, the last man. He went back to his Airbnb, yeah, and I got him on just to tell his story because nobody heard his side of the story, and I got slammed for not, pushing him or putting him into a corner, doing like a Piers Morgan type of thing. I got slammed for it.
Paxman.
Yeah,
he used to.
But I'm not Paxman,
yeah,
and I'm not Piers Morgan. I am Cullan Mais, an understanding person. I like to say I'm either going to give you the microphone to liberate yourself and change people's perception, or I'm giving you the rope to hang yourself. It's as simple as that. You're saying your side of it. I'm just here to listen. But with Tommy Robinson, I didn't even do that. I actually did try and sit on the left a bit and be like, so what about this? What about this? But it was as if it went in one ear and out the other with these people in services. And it wasn't just the people who run the services, it was employees in the services as well. But I got through that. I got through that and, I carried on, but that was the first one, okay? And, from then I've interviewed Lawrence Fox.
Huh.
I came into work one day and I was pulled into a room and asked, "Are you homophobic?" And I said, "You are? Are you homophobic?" And I said, "What do you mean?" "Well, your podcast," and she brought the podcast up of Lawrence Fox, yeah. And I said, "What's that got to do with anything?" And she was really triggered by it, the person, really triggered.
Is Lawrence homophobic?
No.
He's got an issue with trans.
Yes, and this is how uneducated I think the
they don't even know. They don't even know, do they? They've got no idea what Lawrence Fox thinks.
Well, Lawrence Fox said on that podcast about how, I would never touch the rainbow flag. I wouldn't touch it.
Yeah, well, he said burn it.
I burnt the progressive flag because of, the other things in there, But these people wouldn't even want to, I think the problem is these people don't even want to watch them. I've said to them, look, I've actually challenged, they don't want to listen. I interviewed Calvin Robinson and we I questioned him on what do you think about paedophilia in the church? And he returned with talking about, he gave an answer of whatever it was, but then he went on to say, who has access to children now? And he brought onto the topic of drag queen story time. So I went into work on a Monday, and it was every week then. And it wasn't even if the person was right. As soon as I'd done the Tommy one, every single guest I had on was scrutinized, was picked apart by someone in services. I'd come in on a Monday, they'd go out on a Sunday. On a Monday morning, I had a new complaint off multiple people because of my podcast that has nothing to do with my job. And the Tommy, the Calvin Robinson one, I remember telling him about it. He was like, "I cannot believe it, mate. Like, this is ridiculous." Someone came up to me, a manager, and said, "Look, we've had a complaint by a trans person who says that they're scared to access our service now because you've interviewed Calvin, who said something about drag queen." And I don't even think that there was someone who had a complaint. I think they lied about that because if you're if you're on drugs, like, you don't even care about these things. You just want to get help. No one cares about politics in that world. I know it. I've lived it for 12 years. We don't talk about politics. It's the services that do this. And they've made them very, very woke. Kaleidoscope, who I worked for, was different. It was the other services that were kind of meshed into it. So there's other services that work alongside Kaleidoscope. I always looked at Kaleidoscope as a progressive service. And I know some people might think this is wrong, but to me, like, progressive drug and alcohol services would be employing someone who was a drug addict, who was a criminal, giving him that chance. Progressive would be giving out crack pipes to make people safer. Now, I know some people be like, why would you give him a crack pipe? That's condoning it. but I'm trying to keep them safe. I'm trying to, like minimize bloodborne viruses. Like a drug consumption room to me would be a progressive drug and alcohol service because there's no needles on the floor, in the communities with the harm reduction side of things, yeah? And that's what Kaleidoscope were on. And I really championed that because without their progressiveness, they wouldn't have employed me. But the other services, their progressive is nothing to do with drug and alcohol services. It's about, what flags they wave, how they identify. And it's really, really sad because they're not helping any of the people they need to.
That's what a lot of people think about, that kind of progressiveness that we're talking about. I think a lot of those people are drawn to charity work because they get to feel good about themselves without necessarily actually doing good. It's more about looking good, I suppose.
Yeah, I honestly think that a lot of these, my mate said something to me and it hit home. He said, there's not much recovery going on in these recovery services. And he's right, mate. There's not. And what was really sad with me is they should have really championed me, used me as an example for others. I get so many messages daily of people who are going through it who are inspired by me and want to change and do change. But the services, it was as if they didn't want that. As soon as they used me at the beginning and they had their cake, they got what they could out of me. I was just like most of the others I heard about before me who have gone back to drugs. And there are a lot of people in services who end up overcoming addiction. They try and get into work in these services and they end up being treated so bad that they go back to drugs. How is that possible? I'm working for a drug and alcohol service that are meant to help people and they're almost pushing me back to heroin. It's crazy. So this got really out of control, and it became toxic, and
it got quite Kafkaesque with you, wasn't it? There were quite a few meetings and really asking about what you really think and all that.
Yeah, that was kind of like the last straw, which I'll go on to. But when I was working there, there was this service in Cardiff. It's a new service, and this is how I kind of got involved with these other services. So my organisation and these other two organisations came together as a merger to create this new service. So they're, when you leave when you leave primary school, you go into high school, you might speak to some of your old friends, but you end up meeting other people and you might clash with people. That's what a merger is, isn't it? Like different cultures are coming together to create this new organisation. And there was a lot of teething problems, but one of the services was this really woke service. Okay. And some of the staff members there were just totally different ideologies compared to the organisation I worked for. But I remember after one of the podcasts I'd done, I came into work one day and the whole building, it was as if they had like a WhatsApp group. It was as if they would have meetings and they all ignored me. I came into work one day and every single staff member in there ignored me.
That's a way to treat somebody who's recovered as a drug addict.
Yeah, and a lot of these staff members are like young students who have just like got placement, or some of them have left uni and now they're working there. And then there's like others who are, in their 40s, they've worked in a call center, now they're working here, but they're all so cliquey. And
it's a liberal elite. That's what that is.
Yeah. And I managed to speak to someone who said they think you're a homophobic racist. That's why they don't speak to you. And mate, I went into a side room and broke down crying.
Oh man.
And it was like, I actually couldn't believe it, mate. All because I interviewed people on my podcast, and, I tried my best to even talk to these people, pull some aside and say, why do you think this of me? Look, Jack. And they wouldn't have it. They absolutely wouldn't have it. There was ploys then to try and get rid of me. So someone said that I was selling drugs to service users. Another person said I actually use drugs. And one of the funniest things was during this time, I actually interviewed a service user who was a trans person. Fascinating story. The girl, she identifies as a girl now. I'm getting woke now. But basically, she wanted to go through a change and she couldn't get in the UK at the time. So went to Amsterdam, and being in Amsterdam, she ended up getting lost, became addicted to drugs in Amsterdam, ended up working in the blue light district, which is like the gay and the trans one.
Yes.
And just ruined her life. So her seek of trying to become a trans person, she ended up ruining her life. And I found it a really fascinating story, and I wanted to interview her. And the services I worked for, who are trying to paint this picture of me of being this raging homophobe, anti-trans person, they referred me to social services for taking advantage of this person.
What?
Yeah, it was as if they were trying to make out like
you were going to make fun of them?
Well, no, because I think it was more of the terms of like, we can't have him interview this person because it breaks down our theory. It breaks down our theory of him being a anti-trans person. You know, I interview many people I don't agree with, or I don't agree with their viewpoints, but I still want to give them a voice. I still want to listen to them. And I think the situation that's happened recently with Charlie Kirk and is absolutely horrendous, because what he stands for is kind of what I stand for. Like, you know, it doesn't matter if you agree with a person or not. Like, and I think this is the problem with the left. They cannot stand that. They cannot fathom that you can actually sit down and have a conversation with someone that you disagree with.
It's really scary. It's really scary. And so we're running out of time a little bit. I mean, so what, where did we get to? What was that?
So I was told that I was called in by the head of my services to say, we're going to do some media training with you.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Now, before this, there's been many meetings, and there's been moments where the other services have tried to go to my CEO and try and control what guests I have on my podcast. They were a complete organization, nothing to do with my podcast or my platform. Were trying to control the guests I have on my podcast, which I find absolutely crazy. Yeah. But there was multiple things that happened, right? And one day I'll go into it all. But eventually it came down to that I was going to have a media training, and it was going to be like a podcast, and it was going to be the CEO of my agency and someone else. When I went there, there was like it was four of us in the room, 2 people I didn't ask to be there as well. And they said, we're going to start asking you some questions now. And I said at the beginning, I said, that's fine. I said, but who are you asking me this as? Are you asking me as Cullan Mais, the Kaleidoscope employee, or are you asking me as Cullan Mais, my personal opinion? Which one is it? And they wouldn't tell me. It was like they were trying to purposely trip me up. And it started quite like, vague questions like, what do you think of drug addicts? Then it went on to, what do you think of pedophiles? And he was like, well, look, I don't agree with pedophiles. I think they have a safe place in hell for them. But working for a service, I know that we have a lot of pedophiles that access our services, and we have to work with them. Yeah. So it was trying to give it a two-worded, like a double-edged sword.
Are they trying to catch you out because they're hoping that you're right wing and the right wing don't like the pedos?
Yeah.
And so you would refuse to work with them? And
yeah, then they started asking me, what do you think of the burqa? Then it was, like literally, what has this got to do with my job? Yeah.
Do you get many people coming in a burqa who are addicted to drugs?
No, this is the funny thing about it. This is like the funniest thing. Like,
have to get it under the thing.
Well, the saddest thing about it is these people hate the working class. These people hate British people, but that's 99.9% of the people who are paying their bills. The reality is 99.9% of people who are addicted to drugs living on the streets are British people. So these people that they pretend to care for, they actually hate.
Yeah.
That's what's sad.
You should have had to ask them questions for half an hour. Right. Go on. No, you've asked me stuff. Now you guys. Do you actually care about the British people? Do you? Prove it to me.
Yeah. And it became like I actually had emails come out of nowhere on the rise because of the rise of the far right. We are putting you through far right extremist training, and I actually replied and said, "This is great. I'd love to go on this because I actually want to know what you think far right is. By the way, will you be doing far left extreme training as well? Because I've been attacked by left extremists in my workplace, and I would really like to get to the bottom of this." And I had no reply. They didn't invite me to the far right, and they didn't say anything about the far left. But what came to that loggerhead was that meeting, and it got really, really quite it ain't like, end up talking about Nigel Farage and stuff. And I was like, what has this got to do with my podcast and what I do in my job as a drug worker? Because the reality was I was an amazing drug worker. People loved me. People related. People felt like they could trust me. And I was being judged for something totally different. And it ended up getting quite nasty. And I actually said, regardless of what you think is true or not true, because he was trying to say there's no illegal migration problem. He was trying to get to all this stuff, yeah? And I said, regardless of what you think, this is what the British public are actually scared of. I'm saying to him, like, the people who access your services are living on the streets. Some of them are accessing hostels on floor space, and they're seeing people come into this country living in 4-star, 5-star hotels, getting housed before them. I said, regardless of what you think, this is what your people who are accessing your services think. And I said, one way or another, one day it's going to go off. And they went, time, let's leave it there. And I went out for a cigarette, and I had a missed call off my partner, and I answered the phone, and she phoned me crying. And I was like, what's the matter? And she said, 6 kids have just been stabbed in Southport. So it was like, we've just had this massive interview with this conversation in my work about it's going to go off and whatever. And then these kids got stabbed in Southport. And I went away for a week straight after that on holiday. So in their heads, they must have thought, what the fuck is going on here? Like, he's actually right, what he's saying, like, And I came back, and it was just the rhetoric of, I actually thought maybe they could understand what I was saying, but instead they were all far right, like the media said and stuff. And I got pulled into the room again and said, look, I think we need to have a chat. I think you need to start thinking what you want to choose, whether that's your podcast or the organization. And I said, well, I don't want to choose any of them. Like, they both mean so much to me. Like, one's my left arm, one's my right arm. I've started them both at the same time. That's my job. That's my hobby. Like, why have I got to choose out of one of them? Do I choose what you do in your spare time, or who you vote for, or what football team you support? No. Like, why have I got to suffer here? And it got really on top. I was told that, like, certain people didn't want me there, by certain staff members who I won't obviously name. And the last straw was I went to a service event that I was part of organising. And when I went into this event, 90% of the people there were people that didn't like me, ignored me, thought I was a racist, thought I was a homophobe, thought I was transphobic, thought I was Islamophobic, all because of my podcast. And I had a breakdown, mate. I actually had a mental breakdown. And I went home and, I phoned in sick and said I can't come into work. And it was just, it all got too much for me, mate. Really, really got too much for me. One of the things that I was told as well, just quickly, was the staff member who said, we've had a chat and we think you need to choose one or the other. They said they've had a board meeting, and like, one of the employees there is like a real Stonewall. Is it Stonewall? Yeah.
The charity.
Yeah. He's really staunch on that. There's this woman who they've just employed who is a Muslim, lovely lady. I got on with her like a house on fire, but apparently she's scared to walk around because of the riots and stuff. And your name got brought up in the board meeting, saying how, these riots were the direct responsibility of someone who Cullen's friends with. And when I said who, and they went, Tommy Robinson, and I interviewed Tommy Robinson 2 years ago on a podcast. What are you on about? I said, number one, how is he responsible for the riots? And number two, what has it got to do with it? Like, I said, what? I said, if Louis Theroux interviews the KKK, does that mean like he's part of the KKK now? And they just don't understand it. They just haven't got grips with it at all. And that was it. That was the last straw for me. I couldn't go back into work. I was that close to going back to heroin and stuff. And I was off for 6 months. And I don't work there now.
what a way to treat, you were the icon of what they were doing.
Yeah.
What a way to treat you. Unbelievable. And that's why I say this is the archetype of exactly, I want to look good, but not do good. That's what they're doing by pushing you out. They don't want to try and understand. They think they know better, and they've pushed you out.
Yeah.
That's gutting, man. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no, do you know what? I actually, like, I have a criminal record. I can't just get a job anywhere. To me, that was my life. That there was my job. And I was so envisioned that this is what I'm going to do. And do you know what? They used to gaslight me and say, you don't belong in services anyway. You're going to go far with your podcast. That's where you belong. And I'm like, who are you to tell me like what I want? I was made like, because I would expose services as well for what they're not doing. Like they made out like all I cared about was my podcast and views, and actually didn't realize that all I cared about was making the service better and helping people, you know? And, you know, some of these people who are directly responsible for me leaving that world and that organization couldn't give a fuck about the people who work in it. I don't know if you can swear, but they couldn't care less about these people. And they would gaslight me to say I didn't care about these people. Like they could get a job in McDonald's, they could get a job in British Gas, they could get a job working anywhere, right? This is all I had. This is all I know. And this is all I wanted. And I was forced out and made out to be a racist. You know, my daughter's mixed race. You know, my partner's half Jewish. You know, like I said, my family came from a migrant background. I wouldn't be accepted by the far right, the real far right, not the far right that they label. You know, and it's like, it's crazy.
That's crazy. I keep saying that more and more people I see publicly speaking out are people who, like yourself, come from an immigrant background, have a wife, a girlfriend, or this or that, all those kinds of things, because those people are not so worried what everyone's going to think about them. It's almost like a shield. My wife's an immigrant. My family are Jewish. So I'm less worried that people will go, you racist. So I can just be honest and speak out. And the more you look at everyone, Nigel Farage's wife's an immigrant. The trigonometry guys are both immigrants or second generation Franzese. Everyone we actually can be honest. Those guys who are not are often the ones who refuse to let anyone even speak about it.
And isn't it funny as well? Like when we look at the Unite the Kingdom march that just happened. There was more people of color. There was more culture, and you know, at the march than there was the anti-march.
Of course,
you know, because these people can see it for what it is. And the thing that really upsets me is, like, people will call them coconuts, or people will say, and you're like, that's racist in itself. Like, horrible. How can you say that?
Horrible.
Well, so these people they're not allowed to have their viewpoints, and they're valid viewpoints. It's the truth.
It's gutting what's happened to you. Where can people, I've got another question for you, but where can people go and follow you, follow your podcast, and follow your journey?
Yeah, so Cullan Mais on Instagram and Facebook and X. Not really on the X much because it's hard work, and my head goes with that one. But I have got it. And the Central Club, which is on YouTube and all social medias, Instagram, Facebook, X, TikTok, do it all. But my mission is to be that beacon of hope, of people can change. You can be at the depths. You can be, totally writ off. And you can be a success. And, I really thought my life ended last year when I left that job, because I was like, how am I gonna change? And another one was I actually won a big contract with colleges, a big contract doing public speaking and doing workshops with these kids. That got cancelled as well because someone sent them my stuff and they were like, we're really sorry, we can't work with you. And you talk about reparations. I really think that people who have been affected by this woke agenda should have reparations one day. You see Piers Morgan talk about the woke is ended. He's got this book coming out. I don't think it's ended quite yet, but I think when it does, people who have truly been affected, me, yourself, I've followed you for a long time, Andrew, and what you went through when you pitched your idea at the BBC, like I can only imagine what you went through, mate. It's really, really sad. At the end of the day, we should be treated an equal, not on colour and background and
well, even now, the amount of brand revenue that we lose out on because we get all these deals, we get to the last minute, someone wants to sponsor the podcast, and then someone somewhere goes, he's had Tommy Robinson on. That's it. Sometimes they don't even notice. They let the ad run for a month and then they say, we're not going to pay you, even though you've done the ad, because we've realised you had Tommy on, and here's a number of things you have said that we don't agree with, including you've agreed with J.K. Rowling, you supported J.K. Rowling, and so we're not going to pay you. That's a breach of contract, and they won't continue with the brand. So we've had all sorts. It doesn't seem, and I agree with you. Yeah, woke is dead to an extent. The worst parts of it, I think, are people. You see people like Emma Watson starting to walk it back a little bit. Quite a few comedians and actors and things going, well, we went a bit far with that trans thing. But it's still there.
It's still there. Yeah. It's there in the places that it needs not to be, you know,
Yeah.
where the power holds it. Like you said, I think big figures are starting to walk away from it, but we actually need the ones who control the purse strings, the ones who are part of these organizations. They're all in bed together, see?
They're like the deep state. I think of the deep state of the government, but it's almost like the deep state as in the civil service, or the equivalent in companies, brands. Those are the people you never see, but they are affecting things. And for a lot of podcasts who are still starting out or slow, you know, they're not going to get any brands if they are speaking out about these things. And people might go, oh, it's just money. Well, how are they going to pay for the studio? How are they going to be incentivized to continue talking about these things when they know they could go the other way and say all this woke stuff, get loads of brand, you know, and they'll be incentivized to move that way. It's gutting.
Do you know the most the most frustrating thing with that is though, like especially in my service, and you probably get it as well. Like people used to try and gaslight by saying, you're doing this for the views and the money, when you know full well by you doing this, you're not going to get the views. You're actually going to get cancelled, sadly
100%.
enough. You're actually being very brave and honest, and you've got a lot of dignity and a backbone to actually stand up for what's right and giving people a voice. And these people want to see you doing it for views and money. We lose from it.
My old channel was about Scientology, cults. No one gave a shit about that. And the money, it was good money. It was really good revenue. And when I wanted to talk about this stuff, everyone got angry at me. The videos were taken down, those kinds of things. So you're right. When we try and do these kinds, and you didn't have to either. Your podcast, you didn't have to do Tommy Robinson as well. You could have continued on that safe journey. You'd still have your job. You'd be much easier to make it monetized. So people just don't understand how it works.
And just quickly for those people as well who have never watched, I haven't just done those on the right. Like I interviewed Ali Dawah. He is he's Muhammad Hijab's like one of his right hand mans. He is like a Muslim. Some people say he's extreme. He's a Muslim preacher. Yeah, I done Ahmed Yaqub twice. The solicitor who actually stood up for the ones who punched the coppers on the Manchester airport. You know, I've interviewed people who have identified as dogs and, you know, like I have done like the wokest of stuff. I've interviewed communists, you know, like I have literally done both sides, but it's, you know, I suppose sitting on a fence gets you burnt sometimes.
Absolutely does. Who's a heretic you admire?
It's very hard, mate, but I admire Tommy Robinson's just his lack of care and worry and consequence of, you know, what may happen to him. I just love the fact that he stands up for what he believes in. You know, I'm not saying everything he says is true, but it's his truth. And, you know, you see what he goes through on a day-to-day basis. You know, what I'm going through now is just a speck of that, you know. Yeah, he's definitely someone that I respect and admire as a heretic.
He's a great heretic. Go and check out the Central Club podcast. It's brilliant. And this is a man who really cares about the people he's interviewing, whatever side they're on. And I think please go and check that out more than ever. And also, I don't usually ask this, but in the comments, make a community of this. I really want to know your thoughts on everything we've spoken about today, about drugs, about working class people being forgotten, about the cancellation of Cullan Mais, because that is utterly mad. And I want messages and comments of support more than ever. I want to see that there are more comments than ever about that, because I know he'll read them, and that's what we need. It's the only way to push back against this madness. And yeah, keep watching this channel.